Hello everyone, welcome to the third video today of, well, obviously the three that I was planning on recording. So let's talk politics right now. Kind of the two more relevant situations going on are the impeachment trials, and then kind of what's going on with Biden in his first few weeks in office. So to kind of start with, we'll go over the impeachment trial. I'm not gonna sit here and pretend that I'm glad Trump was not, or that I'm upset that Trump was acquitted. I voted for Trump. May not have agreed with how he handled everything, but really my only real gripe with him was how he handled his Twitter account. A lot of the policies that he enacted were things that I agreed with, and I didn't agree with the impeachment trial whatsoever. They didn't handle it in a matter that was even constitutional to begin with. Normally you're supposed to have a Supreme Court justice oversee the matter, and they didn't. They just put in charge one of their fellow senators. So very piss poor handling of it. In all honesty, I'm even disappointed that, I'm not surprised, but I'm disappointed that 7 GOP politicians voted to convict when there is really no basis for a conviction to begin with. To kind of go over them, and I'll leave this article in the description, but to kind of go over them and kind of run down why they voted to convict him. First you have Richard Burr of North Carolina, who, to kind of paraphrase what he said, basically institution based on basically, he doesn't even really make sense in his explanation. He says that it's unconstitutional to impeach a president who is no longer in office, but then because the Senate is okay with breaking the rules of the Constitution, whatever, let's impeach him. Like, doesn't make a ton of sense. Lucky for Burr, he's retiring, because I don't believe that he would be getting re-elected if he did run, especially since his reasoning for convicting Trump makes literally no sense. Then you have Bill Cassidy from Louisiana, who basically said that the Constitution in our country is more important than any one person, and basically says that he thinks President Trump is guilty. No, he's not. It's even said during the trials that the Senate had paid people to splice the clip together to make it seem like that Trump incited violence, even though that couldn't be further from the truth. And it just further proves how little the Senate actually cares about evidence, if that's how they're going to handle the situation. And he received a lot of backlash for it, so I will not be surprised. If Cassidy either A, doesn't run for re-election, or B, doesn't get re-elected. I understand that they aren't up for election until 2026, but with how much heat he was getting for his decision to convict, I will not be surprised if he gets booted. Susan Collins of Maine basically said that because Trump didn't peacefully transition power, that was the reason for impeaching him. Not what happened in the slightest. Trump contested the results, which he is allowed to do. Al Gore still to this day feels like he beat George W. Bush. Hillary Clinton still peddles the Russiagate myth, using that as reason to state that she should have been elected. So it's not uncommon for presidential candidates to contest the results. Trump was just doing what he felt was right. That is not an impeachable offense. And after the riots had occurred, there was a peaceful transition of power. Now, by no means am I saying that Trump was ever going to win
if it does not bring you happiness.
His case. I do think that there was some fraudulent voter stuff going on, but I also don't think there was enough to change the results of the election. I think there was enough to make it a lot closer than it was, but odds are that Donald would have still ultimately lost. So I know YouTube is really staunch about how they handle stuff like that. I'm making it very clear right out of the gate. I am by no means saying Trump won the election. I'm saying that just like with every election, there is some error in how votes are counted, because for some reason our government is just that incompetent. Then you have Lisa Murkowski from Alaska. She's retiring here shortly, but she was up for re-election from 2022. Basically, she says that Trump was watching the events unfold live, and because he didn't have the military there, and he tweeted out that Pence failed the country, that that was the push that they needed to act out and invade the Capitol. Also, that he had outright asked them to invade the Capitol. President Trump did not do this. He said, well, he did say go to the Capitol, but he did not say storm Capitol building. And on top of that, he said peaceful and patriotically, which most of the people that went to the Capitol did. There's a couple thousand that actually stormed the Capitol. And on top of that, they left before Trump's speech was done. They had been planning it days and weeks and even over a month in advance. So, baseless accusation. Whatever. They claim that because of the rules that are set with the election in Alaska, that it's unlikely for her to lose her seat in the primary. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if she did, because a lot of the Republican voters support Trump, And a lot of independent voters support Trump because he's a populist candidate. So going against an incredibly popular candidate, even one that lost, because it should be noted that Trump, even though he lost, had the second most votes for a presidential candidate in American history. Second only, mind you, to Biden himself. So, take that for what you will. So it'll be interesting to see how her election gets handled in 2022. Then we have Mitt Romney, the second biggest scumbag of the GOP, in my opinion, to only Mitch McConnell. I do not agree with Mitt Romney on much of anything politically, and he was the only Republican senator to vote to impeach Trump the first time over an equally as foolish impeachment trial. He was one of those never-Trumpers pretty much right from the jump. He kicked and screamed and bucked, hypothetically speaking, the whole way of this whole presidential run of Trump. So, really anything that he says, you know, he's been trying to impeach Trump this whole time. I would hope that he doesn't get reelected, because his state voted 58% in favor of Trump during the election, which again goes back to what I said. A lot of Republican voters like Trump. He was very, very different, and even though he handled his Twitter very poorly, he actually was, policy-wise, one of the better presidents we've had, and easily the best president of this century. Not necessarily competing against much, but he is the only president who didn't start any new wars or anything of that nature during his presidency, since, I believe, HW started one, Clinton started one, Obama, or HW's kid started one, W, who was a moron. Most conservatives would even tell you that. Obama started a lot himself. Trump is the first one in a very long time to have not started any new wars, which is a fresh change of scenery. And on top of that, he was negotiating peace with Israel, actually had an alliance with them, and had a lot of Middle Eastern countries that have been at each other's throats for a very, very long time, negotiating peace as well, which is something that you have never seen from any president in the country ever since we've started doing anything with the Middle East at all. Romney's up for election in 2024. I hope he loses. I hope every single one of the Republicans that is actually running for re-election that voted to convict Trump loses, because they went right along hook, line, and sinker with this completely baseless attempt to convict a private citizen and former president for what exactly? Challenging the election results and asking his supporters to peacefully protest in the Capitol? That's not an impeachable offense. It's well within his rights to do so. And as shown during the impeachment trial, the quote that they love to hang on to with Trump, "Fight like hell," literally pretty much every newer DNC representative and senator, and even a lot of the older ones like Pelosi, have said "fight like hell." Like, that exact quote, word for word. So if Trump should get impeached for that, so should every single representative and every single senator from the DNC who used that same exact phrasing. Because if they're going to use that to say that Trump started the DC riots, then I can use that same claim to say that a lot of the Black Lives Matter and Antifa riots, the ones that actually became riots, were a result of Pelosi and AOC and all of the DNC politicians, whoever said that phrase, fight like hell, saying that. They were the ones that started the riots then, if that's what they're going to base the DC riots off. Don't know how to pronounce his last name, so I'm probably going to butcher it, but Ben Sasse, whatever, from Nebraska, basically said that in November of 2015, when he won his election, he promised to speak out against a president, even from his own party, whenever they exceed his or her powers. I cannot go back in my word. Basically saying that Trump overstepped his boundaries and didn't peacefully transition power. Which, again, Trump did peacefully transition power, but, you know, I can give him credit where credit's due. At least he was consistent in his saying. He felt like, or at least he went along with it, the idea that Trump had overstepped his boundaries. Don't agree whatsoever. And, well, okay, here's the thing. I'm going to agree that Trump exceeded presidential power in some manners. And that's with executive orders. Executive orders are not something a president is supposed to be able to do. And it is something that literally every president since, I believe, our third one, actually it was George Washington. George Washington was the first president to do an executive order, and every president since then has done an executive order. That is not part of their powers. So in that aspect, Trump did overstep his powers. But even then, like, if you're going to impeach Trump for that, then you would need to impeach every president before him and probably every president after him. Because the only exception I can think of where a president did it, well, there's a couple. The only two exceptions I can think of where a president did not overstep their direct powers given to him by the Constitution was Grover Cleveland, who was easily the most libertarian president in American history and the only one to win 2 non-consecutive elections. And then I believe John Tyler. I'm not sure if it was Tyler or not, but it was one that had been elected early on in the history of the presidency, and they only lasted, I think, 3 months, if even that. So it was our 9th president, and okay, it was not John Tyler, it was the one rightly William Henry Harrison. He had lasted literally a month, and him alongside, like I said, Grover Cleveland, are really the only presidents to not in some way, shape, or form overstep the powers given to him in the Constitution. That's not an impeachable offense. And what he's claiming Trump did to overstep his powers didn't happen. Therefore, he's impeaching it or convicting him for something he didn't do. So, very foolish. However, he, I believe, is not... Well, okay, he's not up for re-election again until 2026, so... not much that can be done there. And then you have Pat Toomey of Pennsylvania, who basically said that because of Trump's actions, the transfer of power was not peaceful for the first time in American history, which is false. Genuinely false. I mean, you can go back to Buchanan when he was president. Now, I don't know if he necessarily just outright didn't transition the power to Abe Lincoln peacefully, but based on the actions that Buchanan had made while he was in office, or lack thereof, easily the worst president in American history, by the way. Don't even argue with me on it. We had almost broke out in the Civil War, which, to be fair, was probably inevitable anyways. But we had almost broke out into it before Abe Lincoln could even take office, and as a result of Buchanan's actions, we actually almost lost the Civil War before Abe Lincoln was in office. Now, I understand that it didn't break out right away. It didn't even break out right away after Abe Lincoln had been elected. But Buchanan right there almost screwed the country over. So, no. Trump, first off, there was a peaceful transition of power eventually. Trump just contested the results like he has every right to do, and like many candidates on the losing side of things have been doing for years. Once it had been decided that he was not going to be reelected, the powers transitioned peacefully. The process may not have expanded over the many months leading up to Biden being sworn in, like it did with Trump and Obama, or which you could even argue that that wasn't a peaceful transition of power, considering Obama tried to set Trump up for failure pretty much right from the jump, or plenty of presidents before them. But there was a peaceful transition of power. So foolish of him to say. However, he's not seeking re-election. And to be fair, good on him, because I don't think he'd win re-election. I don't think any of these people, any one of these 7, are going to win re-election, because Trump was a populist, and he is the second most popular presidential candidate in American history, second to only the person he lost to, Joe Biden. You can't upset and infuriate that many of American voters and expect to win your seat back. But now we can get into Joe Biden. I don't think any president, aside from Buchanan, has done this much this early into their presidency to damage America as a country. So the first thing he did was cancel the whole Keystone Pipeline, which, eco-friendly, green, green energy people are going to be in favor of. I personally think our green energy is way too immature and not perfected to go off of yet. So, given the fact that that was a lot of jobs, I'm going to say that that was the wrong decision to make. But you know what? That's not nearly as upsetting and infuriating as what he did afterwards. Because he then turned around and set forth plans to do a pipeline over in the Middle East. So he took thousands, hundreds of thousands of American jobs and moved them overseas to the Middle East. Appalling, disgusting, and just wrong. So that was the first thing he did. He took away hundreds of thousands of American jobs, and he shipped pretty much the same project over to the Middle East. Stupid. Then he Israel. So I was just talking about earlier how, or maybe I wasn't, one of the many things that Trump had done that I approved of was his alliance with Israel and a lot of the peace brokering that he was doing between Middle Eastern nations that had been at each other's throats for years, decades even. He's getting all these countries that had constantly been fighting to work out peace agreements. Biden is the first president in a very, very, very long time to not contact Israel this early into his presidential campaign. And on top of that, he's going back and pretty much tearing up and ruining every peace agreement that Trump was brokering. This is dangerous. Potentially even more dangerous than his whole pipeline situation he's working out. Because if those countries fall back into war, that's just going to be another reason to send our troops over there. And I'm already not in favor of our troops being over there. Most Americans are not in favor of our troops being over there. It's just more warmongering bullshit. And I'm absolutely just fed up with it. So, not a good start to Biden's presidential run. I hope, for the sake of our country, that it gets better. I don't think it will, because I've never thought Biden was a good potential presidential candidate. I don't think very highly of his policies, and I don't foresee it getting any better, but I hope it does. I also hope, for the sake of the country, that he sticks true to his word and that he's a one-term president. Because God help us if he gets reelected for a second term. Everything that Trump had done to boost our economy and work out all these peace agreements with all these nations that we had spent years in to try and more or less force peace. And then the alliances we've made that a lot of presidents before him wouldn't have even fathomed attempting to make. And then, albeit not necessarily the most successful thing, but cracking down on China, Biden is not going to do that. Not even close. all that progress that Trump had worked towards and the bill he had pushed to help black communities. A lot of people don't know about it because it wasn't talked about. All the media ever wanted to focus on was Trump's Twitter. But there was an executive order he made, which I know I said earlier was very unconstitutional. Executive orders in general are unconstitutional. But if you're going to make an executive order, at least make it a good one. And this is one that I liked. I don't remember the exact details of it, but essentially it was giving funding to help black Americans in kind of more impoverished communities get employed. And that was a very good bill. And I don't know if Biden's tore it up. I hope to God he hasn't. But people focus on the language of Donald Trump and not the policy of Donald Trump. And because of that, they allowed this warmongering status quo jackass Joseph Biden to become president of our country. I hope this unity that they're promising comes to fruition. I doubt it though, because they're already going out of their way to cause more civil unrest. That is going to be the end of this video. If you like it, comment, share it. If not, whatever. I'm not going to back down from sharing my political views just because somebody that views my channel disagrees with me. So thank you for watching and goodbye.